Early in the morning, in August of 1986 year, when the sun was just beginning to illuminate Central Park in New York, an event occurred that shocked the whole city. Around 6 in the morning, a young woman was found unconscious in the park. This event was the beginning of a complex investigation, which eventually had to reveal the shocking truth. The media covered every turn of this story with unprecedented zeal, but their approach to the news raised many questions. Amazing. But the media took a position that seemed favorable to the suspect. This effect has spread to public opinion, creating a contradictory atmosphere around the investigation. In the course of events, it became clear that the suspect was actively spreading false information about the victim, trying to blacken her reputation. To everyone's amazement, some media picked up this version without checking the facts properly. This behavior of the press has caused sharp criticism from human rights activists and experts on journalistic ethics. In the mid-80s, New Yorkers faced a series of shocking and disturbing events. At that time, the city was very different from the modern metropolis and not for the better. New York was considered one of the most disadvantaged cities in the United States, but it continued to be attractive to young people. The streets of the metropolis were fraught with many dangers. The crime rate reached an unprecedented level. Thousands of crimes were registered annually. Central Park, especially at night, caused concern among residents of the city. This place was surrounded by creepy legends that frightened children. In the early morning of 1986 year, a woman went for a bike ride in Central Park. Suddenly, she noticed something unusual on the grass. As she got closer, she realized with horror that this young woman was lying motionless. In a panic, the witness ran to the nearest public telephone and hurried to dial the emergency number 911. It happened around 6:30 in the morning. Police and emergency services soon arrived at the scene. Unfortunately, the help was no longer needed. What she saw shocked everyone present. The identity of the victim was quickly established thanks to the identity card found. It turned out to be 18-year-old Jennifer Levine. After that, the investigators began to collect information about what happened to the young woman. Jennifer from her youth was distinguished by purposefulness and creativity. Her ability to laugh at herself charmed others and helped her overcome any obstacles. She came from a wealthy family in Port in Washington, was the daughter of successful Steve and Alan, who divorced when she was 5 years old. After moving in with her father, a famous realtor in Soho, Jennifer went to an elite private school, instead of a regular school in Manhattan. There she quickly adapted and, thanks to her academic success, won the respect of both teachers and peers. Her social circle consisted of the children of wealthy parents, and Jennifer easily coped with a complex program that prepared for admission to the best universities in the country, including Spruce and Harvard. Over time, she made friends in prestigious schools in New York. Parties inviting lawyers expanded her circle of acquaintances. On the eve of important events, a group of future students, which included Jennifer, lived on East Street, near Central Park. Other friends were scattered around the city, but they all also gathered at a popular meeting place. It was there that Jennifer met her first love, Dorian. However, this relationship was short-lived, and soon Jennifer fell in love with Robert Chambers. Robert introduced himself as the son of wealthy parents who own a country club. Their acquaintance began with a fleeting glance, but only a year later turned into a real love story. A few dates quickly turned into a serious relationship. On August 25, 1986, Jennifer entered the university, which was a great joy for her. However, the next morning, something unexpected happened. She was found in critical condition in Central Park. This news shocked everyone. Any questions? Did Jennifer a random victim of a crime of the metropolis, or it was a planned action? In those years, New York was rocked by a wave of crime. However, among the many incidents of the story, Jennifer sparked an unprecedented public outcry. Partly due to the fact that the victim came from a well-known wealthy family, there was a lot of pressure on law enforcement agencies. Investigators suspected that this was the work of a serial criminal. An inexperienced observer might think that we are talking about unwanted treatment in this unsafe place. However, experienced investigators, who studied all the details, suspected a staging. Jennifer was lying unnaturally, as if she had been deliberately placed in a certain position. Her clothes were in a strange state, and some items of clothing were found 100 meters from the crime scene. The investigators' suspicions were quickly confirmed. Forensic analysis revealed traces of biomaterial belonging to other persons. This case has attracted media attention. Journalists wondered how such events could happen under the noses of the police, why the authorities were inactive, and whether it was really impossible to ensure security in such an important public place. This has especially increased the tension in the context of the general criminal situation in New York. Residents of the city were outraged. A real media turk has begun. Police phones rang nonstop from calls from members of the press. Gradually, information about the circumstances of the incident leaked to the media. Every suggestion of the investigators immediately appeared in the headlines, causing even more speculation and rumors. Nevertheless, the police managed to hide the victim's name for a long time so as not to affect the course of the investigation. When the mother found out about the incident, she immediately went to Central Park and there faced the worst nightmare of her life. Despite the tragic moment, reporters surrounded the woman. The father of a young girl in tears called her classmates, telling them about what had happened. Despite the deep shock, Jennifer's relatives were forced to provide the police with all relevant information that could help in the investigation. It turned out that Jennifer was planning to go out with two friends the night before. Her father gave the investigators her diary, in which Jennifer wrote down her plans. This allowed us to reconstruct the chain of events that led to this tragedy. The story of Jennifer and Robert began to unfold when detectives began to investigate. First, they checked out Jennifer's ex-boyfriend, Dorian. It was assumed that the recent breakup could leave him with a bitter taste. It turned out that they had met at a Mexican restaurant the night before. It is worth noting that at that time there were no social networks and smartphones that could facilitate the exchange of information. Detectives had to painstakingly collect data bit by bit, interviewing witnesses. They found that Jennifer, along with two friends and an ex-boyfriend, was celebrating in a bar after 20 hours and 30 minutes. About 3:45 in the morning, one of the friends left. A second one soon followed. Around the same time, Robert Chambers came to the bar. Jennifer's attention shifted to him, and they stayed together until the end of the party. The ex-boyfriend also left the institution. Detectives went to interrogate 19-year-old Robert. He was taken to a police station near Central Park. Immediately, attention was drawn to the scratches on the young man's face, which seemed suspicious to the detective. Robert claimed it was from a cat, but they didn't believe him. He was asked to tell what happened to Jennifer. According to his testimony, he met Jennifer at a party around 3 o'clock in the morning. They were talking about her upcoming departure to university. Before the bar closed around 4 in the morning, they went out. He said goodbye and went home. Robert claimed he didn't know what happened next and denied any involvement in Jennifer's disappearance. Detectives were of the opinion that the scratches indicate the opposite. They looked like signs of a struggle. Besides, Robert was the last person to see Jennifer. He became the prime suspect. Detectives tried to get to the truth, but the young man repeated his story as if he had learned it by heart. The interrogation lasted almost 12 hours. So far, Robert has not allowed a contradiction in his testimony. Experienced detectives took advantage of this. Everything happened under the close supervision of journalists who listened to the interrogation in the next room. Less than 24 hours after Jennifer's discovery, Robert Chambers confessed to the manslaughter incident. The young man told about an unusual event that happened that night in Central Park. According to him, their walk with Jennifer took an unexpected turn. Jennifer, apparently, showed excessive persistence in her romantic intentions, which surprised the young man. He claimed that Jennifer tied his hands and behaved too aggressively, leaving scratches on his face. In the small town of St. Lor on the coast, where the sun almost always shone, there was no air. Saturated with the smell of the sea, there was a school azure. To him with suspicion. It was a cozy elementary school, where everyone knew each other and the children wrote postcards to their teachers. I hope I continued my story. No one could have imagined that an event would happen here that would shake the whole country to stop its actions. It happened in the most ordinary of his own words. The last week of the school year, so Jennifer. 4th grade students, 20 guys, just got back to class after recess. Jennifer's coming to her senses. Their teacher, Emma, always smiled. He was sitting next to her, young, hoping that she had brought a treat. It didn't happen in the end. He left the scene and watched the arrival of the security forces from afar. The young man insisted on his innocence and claimed that he was only defending himself from Jennifer's aggressive behavior. He said he didn't want to hurt her because he loved her. Investigators wondered why the young man did not call for help, because the timely arrival of doctors could have changed the situation. Robert explained his inaction, possible fear of arrest. After questioning, he was arrested on suspicion of committing a serious crime. The young man's family immediately hired a well-known lawyer. The lawyer demanded Robert's release. He insisted on his innocence and made him look like a victim. The defense chose a controversial strategy, exposing Jennifer in a negative light and claiming that she deliberately provoked a conflict situation. The lawyer insisted that Robert's actions were necessary self-defense, and the tragic outcome was an accident. This controversial defense strategy has drawn public attention to the case. The New York media and city information boards were full of sensational headlines detailing the story. At the same time, Robert found supporters. Many characterized him as a good boy, attractive, successful and charming, intelligent and promising young man. A faithful Irish Catholic, whose impeccable reputation in their opinion. It's impossible. He had two mass cardiac arrest in 20 children. They're all from the same class. In all respects, an attractive resort. Madame Lavra, the principal of the school, answered. By all standards, who are they? The homeroom teacher asked Police Commissioner Zhirav Kostya, who arrived with a group of policemen, but people seem to have stopped us. Barely, replied Laura, and blamed the victim when they entered for Robert's appropriate behavior. Whereas, apart from Robert's own words, there was no confirmation of the victim's aggressive behavior. But for some reason, everyone believed him. While law enforcement agencies were trying to find out the truth, the victim became the object of ridicule. All this happened on the initiative of Robert and his lawyer. I did. The situation was reminiscent. There was a theater. Only I. Robert's defender is Jack Lyman. The whole city. I did my best. Parents, having learned about the client, went into a rage. Emma was even called a miracle appearance then. The only thing that saved her was that the police took her to the station before the newspapers. The crowd was able to photograph a young man in a suit. Lawrence looked more like a model. It does not allow to conduct a person in a serious crime. Whatever. In parallel, Robert actively denigrated the reputation of the victim. This tactic turned out to be so effective that most people developed a biased attitude towards the young woman. And the press picked up every dubious statement. This is how the first articles appeared, presenting Robert's version as true. Gradually, the entire print press and the public sided with the defense. They believed that the victim behaved recklessly, and that she herself went to Central Park to personally meet a promising young man. After their supposedly accidental first meeting, and then she provoked the conflict herself. The lawyer did a great job exposing the victim as almost the instigator of the incident. This provoked a number of protests, including a group of volunteers involved in preventing human rights violations in the city. During the debate, they were regularly on duty in front of the courthouse. The public was deeply outraged by the lawyer's behavior and claimed that he had caused irreparable damage to Jennifer's reputation. Nevertheless, many people easily believed the information disseminated. Robert's supporters are actively in chocolate. They distributed, "Don't let them touch Jennifer's mental behavior. After that, come to me." Led to liberation. "I'll tell you everything." On bail. Lawrence hung up. Protection in full. Deviating from the chosen strategy of denigrating the child. In this everything, something doesn't add up. We have developed a more convincing version. She couldn't have been a murderer. Meanwhile, the Institute of Forensic Medicine was preparing the bodies without any coercion. An unexpected twist occurred when there were some confirmations of rumors about Jennifer's personal life, and these confirmations were unwittingly provided by her own father. Passing the diary of his daughter, he gave the media an opportunity to exaggerate a story detailing alleged numerous connections Jennifer. In fact, it was an ordinary diary, which mentioned relationships with only 2 men, one former and one current. There was nothing untoward there. However, the recordings were deemed inadmissible evidence and could not be used at the court hearings in Robert's case. Despite the limited availability of records, with Young, the leaked information has already damaged Jennifer's reputation. "I don't want my girl to be cut up. What's going to happen? I believe that the truth will be found. To build a strategy. We've already lost. It was necessary. Don't take away their events and understand. After a painful discussion for the sake of transferring money, I could find myself in such a situation. And bills. An important step. Indicating large receipts to the commissioner's own account. That for his heart he has committed more than 30. Photographed in rich houses in prosperous areas. In fact, his life was very different from the image he created of himself. It turned out that the family was not wealthy at all. His mother worked as a nurse in a private clinic and devoted all her time to work to earn money. Robert had no legal income, so he began to engage in illegal activities. This allowed him to create the image of a rich young man with money and at the same time maintain his dependence on banned substances. With these substances, he met 14 years and has taken several courses of treatment, but to no avail. Robert barely finished school, then went to college, but was expelled due to problems with academic performance and addiction. Then, he went to Boston University, but there he faced similar difficulties. Many people knew about Robert's notoriety and his bad habits. Jennifer was planning to break off her relationship with him. Perhaps that's what was discussed between them in the bar that night. One of Jennifer's friends said Robert was furious. He was shocked to realize how far he had come. This happened shortly before the events, not daring to press the button. The investigation showed. Small jewelry disappeared into Rose seamed. They were supposed to be about shopping. The forbidden past of the black robe could quietly walk from one coffin to another. Even a year after the events in New York's Central Park, the press continued to cover this story. It was difficult to find 12 impartial jurors. Resting, bound. 2 women escaped. To select the required number, for strictly 86 had to be considered. The first day of the trial, the courtroom was packed with journalists. Robert insisted on his version of events, placing the responsibility on Jennifer. He claimed that he acted in self-defense and did not calculate the force. However, experts presented evidence of a long struggle. Several marks were found on Jennifer's neck, indicating her desperate resistance. The deep scratches on Robert's face were formed during self-defense, and not in a moment of passion, as he claimed. The accused refused to testify, so the prosecutor's office could not use his past. The hearings lasted almost 3 months. The case turned out to be extremely controversial. Witnesses gave contradictory testimony and left many questions unanswered. After that, the jury retired for a meeting, but reached an impasse. Robert's incredible story could help him avoid responsibility. 9 days later, it was decided to declare the case invalid. The case was declared a failure. There were fears that the new case would not change the situation. The only chance for the prosecutor's office was a guilty plea. Robert was asked to confess to manslaughter in the incident, and in the end, he agreed. On March 25, 1988, Robert expressed remorse for what had happened in the courtroom. He confessed to a less serious crime and asked the young woman's family for forgiveness for all the trials they had to go through. This decision led to a relatively mild sentence: 15 years in prison with the possibility of parole in 5 years. Prior to the announcement of the final verdict, Robert was released on bail. During this time, he organized a farewell party. One of the guests came with a video camera. In the climax of the party, a drunken Robert suddenly became talkative. In the video, he confessed to the crime. Instead of showing remorse, he joked and laughed at what had happened. In prison, Robert immediately became a problematic prisoner. He participated in the conflict, and the guards repeatedly documented violations related to prohibited items and substances. For this reason, his applications for parole were rejected, and he served all 15 years. Robert was released in 2003. Later, the young woman's family decided that Robert needs to pay the family of $25 million. However, the possibility of receiving this amount is extremely small because of a lack of means. Robert did not comment on the events of that fateful night in court. But in 2003, he agreed to an interview and the first publicly spoke about the incident. At the beginning of the conversation, he said that if he had a choice, he would prefer solitary confinement to this interview. It seemed that the responsibility for the fate of the young student weighed heavily on him. Robert saw this conversation as an opportunity to speak out and therefore decided to talk about Jennifer Levine and the tragic events of the past. This man confessed that he had committed a serious crime, and every day he thinks about whose life he destroyed. The conversation lasted 4 hours and never lost its intensity. Given the huge media interest in this case, this meeting was truly unique. However, everything that was happening was like a farce. All attention was focused on who caused the harm, while the victim remained a minor character. Robert said that he will never be able to repair the damage caused to the family Levins. He realized that he had not only deprived the parents of their daughter, but friends, a loved one. But his web of lies has tainted the image of a young woman. In the end, he admitted her innocence. Robert did not consider himself a monster because he felt remorse. In his opinion, if he was a monster, he wouldn't feel anything. However, he admitted that he had behaved extremely stupidly and made an irreparable mistake. At one point, he admitted that short-sightedness often accompanied his actions. The culprit did not expect society's forgiveness because he understood that it was impossible. However, he wanted to apologize and to back up their words with action. Robert has spent the last 15 years in prison, which, in his opinion, was atonement for his actions. He also admitted that he was very nervous because of the need to appear before journalists. Nevertheless, he decided to do it, considering it his duty. Robert continued to deceive, how would think a big part of knowing the story of Jennifer, and tried to show himself better than he was in reality. Despite the fact that Robert's father earned well as a credit manager, the path to the upper strata of society was opened to his son by his immigrant mother from Ireland, Faison, who, as he claimed, was everything to him, and wanted to give him everything possible. Although the young man was expelled from several educational institutions, his mother believed that he would change get an education, and develop his best qualities. It's hard to imagine how deeply disappointed she was when he committed an unforgivable act in 1986 year. After his release, Robert sincerely tried to improve, but how to start a new life if he missed a whole era of change behind bars? Previously, he did not think about the consequences of his actions, which led to a tragic outcome for the young woman. In a conversation with journalists, he admitted that responsibility has now become the main principle of his life. From his youth, Chambers attracted the attention of the opposite sex with his appearance. He admitted that it greatly affected his self-esteem, and bad habits further aggravated the situation. At that time, he was spending several $100s a week on this, which was a significant amount for an ordinary student. Robert admitted that he received money dishonestly. In addition, his mother supported him financially in every possible way. Acquaintance with Jennifer quickly developed into a close relationship. Robert was under the influence of his addiction at that time and realized that he was a danger to others. The young woman saw him as a friend. Perhaps that trust played a sinister role in her life. That last night Jennifer was spending time with friends at a bar, and there she met Robert. They started a pleasant conversation, and another woman Chambers was dating noticed them. In a fit of rage, she left and broke off the relationship. Investigators suspected that it could provoke the aggression of Robert against innocent Jennifer. But Robert admitted that he didn't care at the time. In an interview, he told how a young woman hurt him and how he also hit her back. After the fall, Jennifer was no longer able to get up. Despite the misfortune, he was scared and did not call for help. According to Robert, he drank a little. When Robert realized what had happened, he was in shock and just sat there. The young woman's eyes were open, and he was looking into those eyes. Out of fear of being arrested, he did not call for help. At dawn he left and sat on a stone wall. He watched as journalists and police gathered, called by a passing cyclist. Like other onlookers, he was removed by the authorities, returned home, and went to bed. It seems that after his release, Robert returned to his old way of life. In 2007 year, he was arrested for breaking into the house of an acquaintance, with the purpose of stealing valuables and distributing prohibited substances. He was arrested in his own New York apartment and sentenced to 19 years in prison. Surprisingly, he received a longer sentence for these crimes than for the incident with Jennifer. Robert can be released on parole in 2024 year. After the tragedy, Jennifer Allen Levin's mother became an activist, fighting for new laws to protect victims. Thanks to her efforts, 13 new norms have been adopted in 10 years. In an interview with a TV channel in which she wanted to restore Jennifer's reputation, Allen said that the memory of her daughter helps her in this activity. Usually every crime has a reason. Researchers, based on this, are trying to understand who could have been involved in the incident, and under what circumstances. However, sometimes people's actions remain unexplained, although it can have serious consequences for innocent people. In the 2004 year, 2 unique summer camps were held in California, Caya and El Dorado. These places were not just ordinary children's camps, but real centers of spiritual and physical development, under the leadership of Lindy Cole and Jason Allen. 22-year-old Lindsay from Ohio grew up in a pastor's family and was educated at home. 26-year-old Jason, a native of Michigan, also came from a deeply religious family. Their paths crossed a year before the events described in the Bible College in West Virginia, where Lindsay studied. As they themselves said, a spark immediately passed between them. In the camps of Kai and El Dorado, Lindsay and Jason not only organized rafting and ensured the safety of children, but also taught them the basics of survival in the wild. In parallel, they held conversations on biblical topics. Their approach to work was that they dreamed of creating summer camps with a unique combination of adventure and spiritual growth. Working as senior instructors in existing camps was for them a step towards realizing this dream. They organized hikes, conducted Bible lessons, and were getting closer to their goal step by step. Lindsay and Jason's wedding was scheduled for the 11th of September, 2004 year. Shortly before this date, the couple had a kind of rehearsal nights to prepare for the upcoming celebration. The honeymoon plans matched their characters. Instead of a luxury resort, they chose active recreation on the river in West Virginia. Although they had the opportunity to spend their holidays in more comfortable conditions, Lindsay and Jason chose to remain true to their love of nature and adventure. They planned to combine romance with active recreation, which fully reflected their life philosophy and common interests. A young couple, full of hopes and plans for the future, stood on the threshold of a new chapter in their lives. Around 7 in the evening, Lindsay and Jason finished their day at summer camp. They decided to go to California. Lindsay dreamed of seeing San Francisco, so the couple, entrusting the leadership to other supervisors, set off on a Red Fort Temp 1992nd year of release. The young people planned to return on Sunday around 6 in the evening. When the camp staff woke up on Monday morning, they found that Lindsay and Jason were still missing. This was completely out of character for a punctual couple. Attempts to contact them were unsuccessful. Concerned guards called their families, hoping to learn something about the whereabouts of the young people. But no one knew anything. Without wasting time, the camp staff appealed to law enforcement agencies. Knowing about the couple's active lifestyle, they feared that the lovers could get into trouble during their trip. While waiting for the authorities to respond, Lindsay and Jason's loved ones decided to start searching themselves, but faced a serious problem. No one knew exactly where the couple was. The future couple planned to visit San Francisco, but they also loved exploring the surrounding area, visiting lesser-known places and deserted beaches. This uncertainty greatly complicated the search, especially considering the level of development of communication technologies at the beginning of the 2000th years. In addition, Lindsay and Jason were known for their spontaneity and could change their plans at any time and go to a completely different place. In fact, the future spouses could be anywhere, and looking for them was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Considering that the young people had to return to the camp by the end of the weekend and did not make themselves felt, there were concerns for their well-being. Since the couple was due to get married in a month, a sudden disappearance seemed unlikely. Moreover, Lindsay planned to return to Ohio in a week to complete the final preparations for the celebration. This situation has caused growing alarm among the couple's relatives and colleagues, leaving many questions unanswered. The relatives of the young couple, having learned about the incident, immediately left Michigan and Ohio for California. Their goal was to help in the search and support law enforcement agencies. Unfortunately, the inspection of the tent camp did not yield significant results. The only thing left to do was to distribute photos of the missing and information about their car. Since Jason and Lindsay were planning to visit San Francisco, the main search efforts were focused on this area. However, the area was vast, which made the search operation difficult. More than 2 days have passed, and there has been no news from the young people. Their loved ones were extremely worried, because they knew that every hour reduces the chances of a successful outcome. And a long day of waiting did not bring any useful information. On the 18th of August, the first disturbing news arrived. A rescue helicopter flying over the rocky coast of California noticed something unusual on the beach. The pilot saw motionless figures in bright sleeping bags on Fish Hat Beach. The police immediately went to the coordinates given to the pilots. Shortly before that, a park employee found an abandoned red car near Fish Hut Beach, about 100 kilometers north of San Francisco. The car was on top of a picturesque cliff with a breathtaking view of the ocean. A database check revealed that the car belongs to the missing Lindsay. Arriving at the aforementioned rocky beach, the patrol found two people. Despite the time of day, they lay still, not responding to hails. They were a young unidentified man and a young woman, each in his sleeping bag on the beach. After examining the scene, detectives were faced with an alarming picture. Two immobile people had injuries incompatible with life. The theory of material enrichment was almost instantly rejected, as personal belongings and valuables remained untouched and scattered nearby. The condition of the detected people indicated that they had been there for several days, which made it difficult to identify them. Detectives suspected it could be a missing couple. Documents in the name of Lindsay Zoll and Jason Allen were found in a nearby bag. Laboratory tests have confirmed these suspicions. Experts also found that there were no signs of illegal actions, which excluded the corresponding motive. The situation was becoming more and more mysterious. There was a suspicion of a possible voluntary departure from life. However, the lack of a murder weapon near the pair put this theory into question. An inspection of the surrounding area did not reveal any other camping sites, which excluded the possibility that the victims knew the potential perpetrator. No one was accompanied. Detectives considered accidental meeting ended tragically, perhaps due to the controversy, as the most likely version. This place was often visited by hitchhikers, tourists, and the homeless. The results of the investigation showed that the murder weapon was a Marlin Model 1894 rifle. This is a fairly rare piece of equipment. This detail could be an important clue, since such a model was usually used for hunting, and its rarity could help in the investigation. Detectives were looking for a suspect, possibly a single man, possibly a hunter and a lover of firearms, possessing such an unusual shooting system. The investigation tried to limit the flow of information, fearing that it could interfere with the investigation. The case seemed complicated from the very beginning. Therefore, the investigator wanted to focus on analyzing the available evidence, rather than checking questionable statements. No significant traces were found at the crime scene. Probably, the criminal took them with him to complicate the work of law enforcement agencies. It was possible that the evidence had been swept away by the wind or covered with sand. There was always wind on the beach. The theories of accidental encounters with a dangerous person or an unexpected conflict were considered. However, at that time the area was not recorded such incidents. Connections with criminal gangs or illegal substances were investigated. But all the familiar couples categorically rejected such a possibility. Lindsay and Jason led a healthy lifestyle, had no bad habits, and avoided dangerous hobbies. For more information, the police began analyzing recent calls, correspondence, and banking transactions from the couple's phones. Footage of the bridge, the Golden Gate, and Alcatraz were found on their cameras. The future spouses visited many tourist places in San Francisco and moved north. Numerous photographs helped reconstruct the traveler's route, but did not advance the investigation. They interviewed local residents. It turned out that the couple arrived at the fishing pier on Saturday. Many people have seen them. Lindsay and Jason were relaxing and walking, photographing the neighborhood. Picturesque landscapes have made this area a popular destination for tourists. Everything indicated that the young people were just enjoying their vacation. According to eyewitnesses, Lindsay and Jason behaved calmly and did not quarrel with anyone. Investigators found no disturbing signs in their behavior. Detectives managed to reconstruct the route of the young couple. Jason and Lindsay drove through many cities of the state, leaving traces in the memories of bystanders. Everywhere they were remembered as cheerful and carefree travelers. They stayed in various places, tasted local cuisine, and went sightseeing. No one noticed anything suspicious around them. The woman contacted the police with information that she saw the couple on Friday and Saturday in places where they left the campsite. According to her, Jason and Lindsay tried to book a room at a coastal hotel. But all the seats were occupied due to the influx of tourists. Despite the failure with the placement, the couple did not lose optimism. They had breakfast and lunch in the hotel restaurant and talked with the staff. The manager of the establishment noticed that the young people looked absolutely happy and in love. Jason and Lindsay tried to find a free room for the night again, but to no avail. Due to the high season, the surrounding hotels were crowded. After that, the traces of the pair are lost for a while. Detectives could not establish exactly why the lovers came to this particular beach. The theory was considered that they were deliberately sent there, but this did not correspond to the facts. All the couple's valuables remained untouched. It is known that Jason and Lindsay mentioned their plans to go to the beach and set up camp during breakfast at the hotel on the 14th of August. In the evening, they reached a rocky beach on coastline. To get down to the water, they had to overcome a steep slope. They left my car at the top, near the tourist house. There was a visitor for vacationers in the house. Checking the records, the police found that Jason had left a note there on the day of his arrival. He shared his impressions of the wonderful time spent with the bride and expressed gratitude for the happy moments. Investigators at that time found no traces of other people's cars or unidentified people on the beach. There were no signs of resistance, which surprised the investigators. However, the main problem was the complete absence of any evidence to find the perpetrator. This uncertainty lasted until 2006 year. During this time, informed of the confidential details were made public. The investigators decided to take this step in the hope of obtaining new valuable information and attracting more witnesses. New facts have also surfaced. For example, during the inspection, a bottle of a rare drink for this region was found, presumably purchased in Wisconsin. In addition, a notebook with poems that did not belong to the victims was found. The connection of these items with the incident remained doubtful. An unusual hat was found next to Lindsay's car, but the tracks ended there. The problem was that all of these items might not belong to the criminal. They could belong to one of the thousands of tourists who visit these places every year. In order to attract public attention, a reward of $50,000 was offered for information that could lead to the capture of the criminal. The exact time of the incident was not known. The couple was last seen at the hotel on the morning of August 14th. Therefore, it was assumed that the incident occurred either on the night of the 14th or on the morning of the 15th. An influx of more than 1,000 phone calls began. People clung to the opportunity to get a high reward. This meant extra work for the police. Every clue had to be checked. The senselessness of the incident was astounding. According to relatives, the victims had no enemies or envious people, and they had no criminal past. When the inevitable happened, they seemed to be sleeping peacefully. Horror gripped not only the close victims. As information spread, locals began to avoid the beach where the incident occurred. In this context, the public demanded that the police catch the criminal as soon as possible and ensure security. However, law enforcement agencies also did not sit idly by. Throughout the investigation, detectives were interested in several people. One of them was a homeless man from Wisconsin. He denied any involvement in the incident, although he was near the beach at the time of the incident. It was suspected that the found bottle could belong to him. Shan Galen, who was pointed out by the witness, showed remarkable behavior. He had an extensive collection of shooting equipment. He was a passionate hunter and had problems with illegal substances. Chance matched the suspect's description. His ammunition was checked, but the wanted weapon was not found. He denied any involvement in the incident, and no evidence was found against him. Therefore, he was temporarily released. At one point, a connection with the famous Zodiac killer was even considered because of the similarity in working methods. There was information about another person who attracted the attention of detectives. He also turned out to be homeless and could have been in the area at the time of the crime. The settlers knew him by his inappropriate behavior. Residents have repeatedly seen this man wandering around the neighborhood, sometimes with a dangerous object. People tried to avoid him and drove him away from everywhere. This man turned out to be 62-year-old Joseph Henry Burgess. He was extremely religious and led the life of a hermit. He explained this by saying that he was waiting for his fate by divine revelation. In 1977, Joseph lived with a group of homeless people in Canada. They were joined by two young men, 20-year-old Dewar and 19-year-old Carlson. Joseph was displeased with their presence and tried to drive them away, but the young people stayed. 4 days later, the young men were found motionless on the beach in sleeping bags. The circumstances were strikingly similar to those of Lindsay and Jason. After that, Joseph disappeared. He became the main object of police interest in connection with the incident in Canada. They've been looking for him for years. Over time, local detectives came to the conclusion that he was probably no longer alive, as the search turned out to be fruitless. The case was almost closed and reopened only in 2000 after the incident with Lindsay and Jason. Analyzing similar cases, investigators came across information about an incident that occurred almost 30 years ago. After the incident with the future spouses on the beach. Despite the testimony of local residents, Joseph was gone again. He did not come to the attention of law enforcement until 2009. During this time, a series of unauthorized home invasions with the aim of stealing valuables was investigated in New York. This incident occurred on the 16th of July, 2009 year. The detainee was identified as Joseph Burgess. Law enforcement agencies took a DNA sample and compared it with evidence found at the scene with a young couple. However, it did not match the traces on the beer can. Therefore, the investigators had to exclude this dangerous person from the list of the main suspects. Despite this, the public for a long time considered Joseph to be the culprit of the tragedy. However, 10 years had passed, and what exactly happened on the beach that fateful night was still unclear. Relatives of the victims held a memorial meeting at the scene of the tragedy. More than 60 people gathered to honor the memory of the young lovers. Although 10 years have passed since the sad events. 13 years after the tragic incident with a young couple who are in the same area, there was another shocking event. On the 14th of March, 2017, an incident occurred in Forest Villa, just half an hour away from Lindsay and Jason's last place of residence, which shocked the residents. A family drama took place in one of the houses, as a result of which 38-year-old Seamus was in critical condition. He lived with his mother and brother. The mother identified the perpetrator. It was the victim's brother, Shan Galen. A conflict broke out between the brothers, which led to irreversible consequences. Shan, known for his short temper, used hunting equipment against Seamus. Shan was a well-known investigator. He has previously been prosecuted for aggressive behavior. In the year 2009, Shan showed aggression by throwing a homemade spear into a stranger's car. This incident almost ended in tragedy. Shan was known for his unbalanced behavior and strange hobbies, in particular, making homemade stabbing weapons, especially spears. Shan's behavior was characterized by infantilism and eccentricity. It turned out that he was obsessed with the ideas of self-defense, but his methods were puzzling. Shan sometimes lived in a world of his own fantasies, which he embodied in reality. Initially, he made equipment for role-playing games. But over time, he began to use it against people. After the incident with his brother, the police checked Shan's social networks. On the day of the incident, he published 11 posts, the content of which caused serious alarm. Some posts were incoherent, others hinted at inappropriate relationships with relatives, including the mother. All of this pointed to serious psychological problems. The analysis of the publications convinced the investigators that the conflict was provoked by an unjustified insult. Shan was detained, but initially refused to cooperate with investigators. Looking through the archives, the investigators found that Shang was previously arrested in 2004 year. As part of the investigation into the disappearance of Jason and Lindsay. On their first visit to Shan's house after the incident with the young couple, the police were amazed at the amount of equipment he had hidden. The man's lifestyle caused serious concerns. He was obsessed with collecting shooting equipment. The only clue was a small fragment found during Jason's examination. A rare rifle, which was supposed to have been used in the crime, was not found in the seized collection of Shan. However, later another model played a role in an unpleasant incident with his brother. Although his involvement in the incident on the beach has not been proven, Shan was initially silent. After a while, he handed over a note with a desire to talk to the investigators. During the interrogation, he confessed to the incident with his brother and began to report on a 13-year-old case involving a young couple. He shared details that only someone involved in the incident could have known. This meant that justice had finally reached the culprit of the tragedy of the two young people. Upon learning of this, the victims' families looked relieved and grateful. After Shang's confessions, it was decided to conduct an additional verification of the information. Checking his mail, suspicious message from an ex-girlfriend. She asked if it was worth reporting Ashana to the authorities for a reward of $50,000. The woman hinted that he was involved in several incidents, avoiding responsibility. Despite the disturbing content, the ex-girlfriend seems to have decided not to act. Investigators planned to question her about Shang's possible involvement in the case on the beach. However, by this time, he had already begun to testify. Therefore, it was decided not to call an additional witness. Shan told investigators that on that fateful day he went to the beach, thinking he was tracking a wild animal. Suddenly, he came across a couple sleeping in sleeping bags. According to him, internal motives pushed him to do something irreparable. The young man became the first victim. He didn't even wake up. The noise woke the young woman. But she also failed to react in time to an unexpected incident. Fearing persecution, Shan collected the evidence in a tin can and hid it in the bushes on his father's property. 10 years later, investigators discovered this piece of evidence, which became the key evidence against the suspect. Shan explained his actions as a mental disorder aggravated by the use of prohibited substances and alcohol. He claimed to have heard strange voices. Investigations have shown that Shang's relatives have been hiding the truth for years. A week after the incident, Shan handed over the crime weapon to his father. Instead of reporting to the police, the father hid a rare object, which helped Shan avoid immediate arrest. Suspicions of involvement in other incidents have not been confirmed. Prior to the trial, Shan was held in a special unit for people with mental problems. His behavior is unpredictable, his speech is often unrelated. Psychiatrists recommended a special prison regime to prevent self-harm and aggression. The defense tried to prove that Shan was insane at the time of the incident, but the prosecution pointed to a number of deliberate actions. Hiding evidence, asking my father to hide homemade equipment. The prosecutor insisted that Shan acted rationally. A psychiatric examination found him sane. In July 2019, a 40-year-old man was found guilty. The sentence was harsh. 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus 94 years for other crimes. The judge stressed that the convict will never be free again. It is noteworthy that shan't be able to explain the reason of their actions, mentioning only the voices in my head, and the desire to hurt for no apparent reason. Strong feelings often motivate people to do great things. Sincere love for loved ones gives parents incredible strength to provide them with a better future. For the sake of family members, they are ready to overcome any obstacles. However, even the purest feelings can sometimes lead to unexpected consequences. On July 27, 1995, in the city of Dayton, Montgomery County, where more than 130,000 people live, a girl was born in the family of Whitney Lynn Heffler. She had an older sister named Chelsea, with whom she had been very close since childhood. Whitney's parents' relationship was complicated. A few years later, after the birth of the youngest girl, tensions in the family reached a peak, and the couple decided to break up. Due to the mother's health problems, custody of the children was transferred to the father. The girls grew up with little contact with their mother. Despite family difficulties, Whitney was cheerful and friendly, showing creative abilities. Her father, noticing her talent, sent his daughter to art school. When Whitney turned 12, her mother was Kimberly. After recovering her health, she decided to return to family life. At this time, Chelsea was already working and living alone. The younger girl was still living with her father. The mother wanted her daughters to move in with her. It was difficult to get close to Chelsea. She no longer needed maternal care. Whitney, on the other hand, was interested in the idea of establishing contact with her mother. They started going out together and eventually got so close that Whitney moved in with her. In the following years, she lived with her mother, keeping in touch with her father. In high school, Whitney met Randy Ryer. There was an attraction between them, and over time, it turned into a romantic relationship. The couple dated for several years before introducing each other to their families. Their feelings were strong, and the young people became an inseparable couple. After school, they looked for work together and planned to study at college. In 2017, Whitney found out that she was pregnant. Although the news was unexpected, both families reacted positively. The parents of both sides supported the couple, considering the creation of a new family natural. Recently retired parents of a young man offered to help raise a child while young people study and arrange their lives. The couple gratefully accepted this offer. Soon, the lovers moved to a small town called St. Paris in Ohio, where the family of the future father lived. At first, they lived in a small apartment and worked. After the birth of their daughter, they decided to move into Randy's parents' house. This step would make life easier for them, allowing them to combine work and study. In addition, it was profitable from a financial point of view. They did not have to pay rent. The grandparents could spend more time with their granddaughter, which everyone seemed to like. In addition to Randy's parents, his younger brother Rodney also lived in the big house. The age difference between the brothers was small. Rodney also studied. I worked and made plans for the future. They lived together as a big and friendly family, supporting each other. Everything seemed to be going fine. The subsequent events were not so surprising. On the 1st of October, 2020, Randy came to the police station and reported the disappearance of his girlfriend. According to him, he saw her for the last time the night before. They had a quarrel, after which she went to friends. The quarrel continued between Whitney and her mother, Valerie, but he did not wait for it to end. Randy said that they planned to spend the evening together, but his beloved decided to stay at home. Later, the young man's friends had to pick him up to go to a party together. According to Randy, his friend arrived at the appointed time to pick up Whitney, but she was not waiting for him as planned. His friend tried to call him several times, but to no avail. After standing outside the house for a while, he decided that their plans might have changed. Randy went to a party, hoping to see my friend Whitney there, but she wasn't there. He told Randy about this case, which caused her concern. Randy also tried to contact the young woman, but she didn't answer. Worried, he called them. According to their testimony, Whitney left shortly after him, and a friend took her away in a car. Valerie saw a young woman get into an unknown car with tinted windows. However, the woman could not see exactly who took Whitney and how many people were in the car. From that moment on, Whitney stopped contacting, and no one has seen her since. The young man waited another day in the hope that Whitney had visited friends and would return. He called all his acquaintances, but no one saw her. Randy could not find out who the young woman left with, and only then turned to law enforcement. Naturally, the investigators first suspected Randy of involvement in the incident, because usually close people are involved in such cases. However, the young man's testimony had reliable confirmation. Several eyewitnesses at the party, as well as his parents, saw him leave alone. At the party, Randy met with friends and was with them until an acquaintance approached him and said that he would not be able to pick up Whitney since she had already left. This man confirmed Randy's story. The police contacted the mother of the missing girl to find out if the young woman had appeared at her place. The woman denied that she had met her daughter. According to her, Whitney promised to solve all the problems and soon returned to her with a small child. Because of problems with the child's father, the woman claimed that Whitney would not have disappeared in this way. All this did not add up to a connected picture, so the police got down to business and began to organize a search for the missing. On the 1st of October, 2020 year, a man was walking through the woods around Kaiser Lake in Ohio. Approaching the cliff, he noticed something unusual below. A strange colored object stood out among the stones. On closer inspection, the man noticed a motionless figure at the bottom of the cliff. He thought it could be a tourist who accidentally fell off the edge of a cliff and became concerned about his condition. A passerby tried to call out to the lying man to wake him up, but there was no response. Going down the steep slope seemed too risky, so the man wisely decided to call rescuers. Soon the specialists arrived. Approaching the lying man, rescuers found that it was a young woman, screaming. It was obvious that her condition was not related to the fall. Traces of external influence were visible on the neck. There were no signs of injuries typical of a fall from a height, which indicated other circumstances of the incident. The identity of the young woman failed to install due to the lack of documents. Arriving police officers could rely only on her clothes and other notable features, including the piercing, to begin the investigation of this mysterious case. They started checking the lists. After studying the statements received by the police station, they quickly found a similar description. The specialists probably dealt with Sweetney Lindler. Her clothes and appearance corresponded to the information about the missing. The report of her disappearance was received shortly before a bystander called the emergency services. It was later confirmed that it was indeed Whitney. Experts have suggested that the cause of the tragedy was strangulation. The circumstances pointed to deliberate actions, so the investigators began a comprehensive investigation. Examining the last hours of Whitney's life, investigators found that she only had contact with her close relatives, her fiancé Randy. His father is Rodney's sister, and his mother is Valerie. Randy's brother, Rodney Jr., was also among the suspects, as he lived in the same house as the family. When the police arrived at Randy's house, they found only Randy's brother. The parents said they took their grandson and went hunting. The officers decided to talk to the young man first. It turned out that Rodney Jr. worked from morning until late at night on the day of Whitney's disappearance. This was confirmed by his colleagues from the surveillance footage. When he returned home, it turned out that the young woman had disappeared a few hours ago. So the young man was immediately excluded from the circle of interested persons. It was established that Randy, as confirmed, was at the party at the time of Whitney's disappearance and did not arouse any suspicion. Questions remained about Weller. Rodney's sister and Valerie were the only ones who claimed to have seen a young woman leave the house and get into an unknown car after their son left. However, this has not been confirmed by anyone else. Randy's parents didn't get home until 6 hours later. Their clothes were dirty, and they explained it by looking for deer in the forest. However, this aroused suspicion. They were able to describe the car that the young woman got into before disappearing, but they did not remember either the license plate or the driver. Since they knew Whitney was supposed to go to the party, they didn't pay much attention to it. Because the young woman calmly got into the car and clearly knew the driver, they assumed they were her friends. They left the family home around 19 o'clock exactly. Having not received important information from witnesses, they decided to examine the place of the disappearance of the young woman, where, according to the parents, there was a suspicious car with dark, tinted windows next to their van. Unfortunately, there were no security cameras there. Passing by the van, the police accidentally noticed something unusual in the open body. There were several black garbage bags with traces of scotch in it. There were women's slippers and gloves nearby. Everything was dirty. The combination of items was strange and not like hunting gear. Law enforcement officers knew in what unpleasant situations such things are usually used. Examining the tape, the detectives noticed several torn-off hairs that resembled Whitney's hair in color and length. There was also a luggage trolley with large wheels inside. It was quite dirty, as if it had recently been used on a country road. Detectives decided to proceed cautiously and not to attract the attention of the owners of the car to their findings. They suspected that the family could be involved in the disappearance of a young woman. Fearing to scare off potential suspects, the Ryder family, the police quietly returned home and requested permission to inspect the missing person's room. Detectives wanted to investigate and to take a mobile phone and PC Whitney for analysis. Valerie's parents allowed the police to enter. In the room of the young parents, they found a missing phone and an almost empty roll of duct tape, the same as the remains of hair found in the back of the van. The officers informed the owners and asked for an explanation. They remained calm and started answering questions. According to her parents, Whitney was cleaning her room that day, and the hair could accidentally stick to the ribbon during combing. Apparently, shortly before the incident, she became ill and suffered from hair loss. Everyone, including Randy, confirmed this version. Despite the confidence and lack of confusion in the testimony, detectives had doubts about the sincerity of Valerie and her husband. The family behaved quite calmly. It was obvious that they were concerned about the disappearance of the young woman, but they spoke clearly. When law enforcement agencies questioned them about the found items, they did not notice anything unusual in the behavior of the mother and sons, but Rodney's sister looked very worried. He thought for a long time before answering the detectives' questions. Detectives were interested in his behavior, and they decided to interrogate him at the police station. There the man told the same story as his son. According to him, shortly before Whitney went to the party, there was a fierce quarrel between him and Weller. First, the young parents quarreled in their room, then the young man's mother intervened. Whitney was furious, claiming that she had proof of her lover's infidelity, and wanted to break up with him. She wanted not only to leave him, but also to return to her mother with her daughter. The man said that after hearing the noise, Valerie rushed to the young people and tried to calm the young woman. She wanted to talk to her and convince Whitney that she was wrong about her son. During this conversation, Randy got angry and left for the party alone. The head of the family then admitted that they had managed to calm the young woman down. She left with her friends in an unknown car. At the same time, Whitney agreed to continue the conversation with Valerie later, but she never returned, and they do not know what happened to her. Rodney's sister also confirmed that his son was indeed fickle and had another girlfriend. They found out about it when another girl announced her pregnancy. It happened a few days before Whitney disappeared. She was sure that the child was about the trend and therefore decided to leave it. The whole situation aroused suspicion, especially because the young man hid these details from the investigators during the first conversation. Besides, his relatives might have had a reason to get rid of the young woman. Randy was called to the police station for questioning. At first, he was asked why he did not mention the reason for the quarrel related to another young woman. The young man explained that he did not want to immediately disclose this delicate topic, as he thought that it would not affect the search for his girlfriend, and did not want to put himself in an awkward position. At that moment, the sad fate of Whitney was not yet known, but investigators suspected that this fact, and the conflict of the young man with his parents, could play an ominous role in the fate of the heroine. Randy then confirmed his father's testimony. He admitted that during the quarrel they were sweetening in his room upstairs. A young woman started a quarrel and accused him of infidelity. She announced her intention to break off the relationship and leave with the child. His mother intervened, they had a big fight and went downstairs. Soon the quarrel stopped. But the young man heard strange sounds. These sounds did not cause him concern or suspicion. Randy stayed in his room and ignored them. Everything calmed down, and after a while, his father came to him, who looked very worried. The man turned to him with an unexpected request. He asked his son to leave the house for a few days and stay somewhere where he would be easy to find. Randy didn't ask about the reasons for this strange request. He just packed up the necessary things and went to his friends, with whom he wanted to spend the evening. Whitney didn't show up again after that. The young man's behavior seemed unusual. The investigators were surprised why he left the house so willingly at his father's request, without asking what happened downstairs. Randy justified himself by saying that the situation with his beloved had upset him very much and knocked him out of the rut, so he decided to trust his parents. The young man thought that his father was offering to take a break from the relationship in this way and give Whitney time to calm down. Because of a quarrel with a young woman, Randy did not call her and just left alone. Given the circumstances of their disagreement, all the party guests assumed that the young woman did not come because of a quarrel. It didn't occur to them that anything could have happened to Whitney. Whitney was known as a friendly and sweet person with no enemies. At the party, the guests noticed that Randy looked upset. He tried to contact Whitney several times, but to no avail. The young man thought that his fiancée was ignoring him because of disagreements, but realized that she could not just disappear. So Randy went to the police. Whitney was later found in a ravine. The evidence pointed to the involvement of Randy's parents, who were on the first floor. They tried to present everything as an independent decision of a young woman, but experienced specialists and detectives saw through this trick. Detectives said Weller, Randy and Rodney Sr. the body to observe their reaction. After this news, Rodney's sister visibly tensed up, which looked suspicious. Then detectives have taken the plunge. They showed the head of the family photos of the place where Whitney was found, without hiding disturbing details. Seeing the condition of his granddaughter's mother, the man broke down. This psychological trick helped to reveal the truth. Rodney's sister began to tell that on the day of his disappearance, he was resting in the bedroom on the first floor. He was awakened by an alarming sound that lasted several minutes, coming from the next room. He decided to check what was going on. Looking into the other bedroom, he saw Whitney lying in bed. She didn't move, and there was a bag on her head, tightly pressed to her neck. Weller was standing next to the bed with a roll of Scotch tape in her hand. The man said that he froze and the following hours passed in a blur. His wife explained that anger seized her when she realized that she would never see her granddaughter again. She lost control and attacked Whitney. Rodney's sister said nothing and mechanically helped his wife. First, he took his son away, so that he does not see what is happening. When he returned, he found Valerie trying to pack Whitney in large plastic bags. Valerie asked him to bring a cart and a large bag. After they packed Whitney, they loaded the bag into the pickup truck together. Arriving home, they spent some time thinking about where to go. They decided to go to the cliff at Kaiser Lake. They put Whitney's little daughter in the back seat because they didn't want to leave her at home alone. They arrived at the place late at night. The little girl slept, unaware of what is happening. Then they took with them the bags, the remnants of Scotch tape, a bag and a cart with the intention of destroying the evidence later. However, unfortunately for them, they did not succeed. Rodney's sister was very nervous during the testimony, while Valerie remained calm in the next room. Investigators questioned the suspects separately, and Valerie was unaware of her husband's confession. She was acting distant and insisted on his version of events. However, when she was informed of her husband's testimony, everything changed. Valerie dropped her mask and confirmed his story. According to her, she heard a loud quarrel between Whitney and Randy. Intervening, she realized that Whitney wanted to leave with her little daughter. The young woman threatened that they would never see their granddaughter again and began to pack their things. Valerie was afraid of losing her beloved little man. She described her condition as confusion. She felt as if she was being persecuted. Valerie claimed that she did not want to cause irreparable harm to Whitney. Rodney appeared in the doorway and froze when he saw what was happening. Valerie ordered him to take Randy away to provide him with an alibi. The rest of her story coincided with the words of her husband. Valerie insisted that she acted unconsciously, in a fit of sudden emotion. Her confession shocked the police, especially because everything happened in the presence of her little granddaughter. Investigators had to find out whether the incident was the result of a sudden emotional outburst or a pre-planned action. Law enforcement officers arrested the elder Rodney in Weller, which caused a wave of discontent among residents and relatives of the victims. Many believed that the young man was involved in the incident with his fiancée. It was assumed that his parents decided to cover for him so that he could continue to take care of his daughter. There were suggestions that Rodney's sister was an accomplice to the crime, since he was not at the scene during the incident and did not help his wife and then went to the party. These assumptions seemed logical, since the young man hid some details during the first conversation with the police. There were also doubts about how an elderly woman could cope with a young and strong Whitney. However, if Valerie was really in a state of strong emotional excitement, it was possible. Randy denied all charges and successfully passed a lie detector test. Due to a lack of evidence, he was not charged with Whitney's disappearance. Until December 2020 year, the couple was held in custody awaiting trial. During this time, 54-year-old Rodney's sister offered the prosecutor's office a deal. In exchange for a confession and assistance in the investigation, the man received only 3 years in prison. He was released on the 28th of March, 2023 year. The case against the 53-year-old Weller began in February of 2021 year. The defense tried to prove her innocence. They claimed that the incident with the victim was the work of unknown people. Then the lawyers insisted on the guilt of Randy and Rodney's sister. However, the prosecutor's office refuted these arguments. Traces were found on the physical evidence in the Weller and the victim. Some of the items had Rodney's sister's fingerprints on them, which indicated involvement in Valerie in the incident and subsequent actions. Her husband and son Randy testified against her for the prosecution. This deprived the defense of the chances of acquittal of the accused. As a result, the jury found the woman guilty of a serious crime and concealment of evidence. She was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole in a year. She can be released in 2045th year. It is known that the victim's sister, Chelsea, received custody of Randy and Whitney's child. The child's upbringing was entrusted to the Clure family, and the girls were forbidden to contact their father and his relatives. Residents of China Township, Michigan, suddenly faced with disturbing findings. Strange objects were found in several garbage cans, indicating a possible crime. To date, investigators can only speculate. She lived in the city of Shores with her eldest son Ramsey. He grew up in an atmosphere of excessive maternal care, which often led to difficulties. Ramsey was born in 1981, and later his younger brother was born. After graduating from college in 1999, Ramsey got a job at an accounting firm. But his approach to work did not satisfy the management, and at the end of the 2000th year, he was fired. A young man. Ramsey allegedly left the house for cigarettes, and his mother never saw him again. At first, no one was worried. A person could meet friends or go about their business. However, when Ramsey did not return home in the morning and did not answer the phone, his mother became worried. The worried woman waited another day, and when she received no news on the morning of January 27th, she filed a missing persons report with the police. She kept calling Ramsey, but could only get through to voicemail. Of particular concern was the cold weather. If Ramsey was on the street, he could be in danger. Therefore, it was necessary to act quickly. Soon the family was contacted by Ramsey's supervisor from law enforcement agencies. Last year, Ramsey was under surveillance because of an incident with a friend in a bar. In addition, he had problems with illegal substances, alcohol, and mental health, so he was regularly checked. The curator was worried that Ramsey might have problems again. The mother said that her son went out for cigarettes on the evening of January 25th and disappeared, although he had no other plans. He took with him a wallet with 2 cards and a driver's license. In order to track his movement, the curator decided to check the operations on the cards. A photo was taken from the mother for search, and the media was informed about the loss. The check showed that no purchases were made that evening. There were doubts whether Ramsey had reached the store. Maybe something happened on the way. Investigators began tracking Ramsey's phone and quickly found him. The device was found on a neighbor's property. Law enforcement officers searched the site and found a mobile phone there, but its owner had no idea how the means of communication turned out to be there. He didn't know anything about Ramsey's fate. Study of the missing person's phone. There were oddities, the calls that Donna mentioned, and even after her son's disappearance, were not recorded. Moreover, if she had really called, as her mother claimed, the neighbors would certainly have heard her in the yard and sounded the alarm. All this aroused the suspicions of the police. The parole officer who monitored the violations was very concerned about the disappearance. The missing person was last checked shortly before the disappearance on January 25th. The officer understood the gravity of the situation and the potential danger that Z. Ramsey could pose to himself and others. The investigator turned to the neighbors to get more information about the missing person and his mother. It turned out that the neighbors had not seen Ramsey for several days, which contradicted the testimony of the mother. An experienced investigator understood that all this looked very suspicious. The Scriva family as a whole was surrounded by oddities. Donna Scriva was born in Dallas, Texas, in 1954. Since her youth, she dreamed of becoming a nurse. Donna's dream came true after meeting Daniel. They were married in August 1978. And a few months later, their first child, Ram, was born. The family moved to their home on Dean Street in Clyches, Michigan. Soon after, their youngest son was born. The family lived modestly and maintained good relations with relatives and neighbors. The carefree life lasted for a long time, but the first serious problems began in the 2003 year, when Donna suffered a heart attack. She almost died on the operating table, and that was just the beginning of her difficulties. The woman became distracted and anxious. In the end, she had to leave her job as a nurse, but she did not give up her favorite profession and found a job as a nurse. 12 years before the events described, Donna and Daniel began to worry about Ramsey's mental health. He suffered from severe depression and could barely control my emotions. After an examination at the clinic, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Since then, his mother has tried to keep him away from home because of her concern for his safety and the safety of others. The situation was complicated by the fact that Ramsey refused to take medications prescribed by a doctor due to severe side effects. Without treatment, the disease progressed. In the 2010 year, Ramsey got into an unpleasant situation, falling on concrete and seriously injuring his head. After this incident, his behavior changed dramatically. Ramsey's mother called this period a crazy time, when his parents couldn't control him at all. He became even more aggressive, and frequent alcohol consumption only worsened the situation. Ramsey was becoming increasingly unpredictable. In the end, he got into an argument with a friend in a bar and got a suspended sentence for it. During the events described, he regularly visited the police station. His father, Daniel, struggled with a serious liver disease for many years. He caught it in his youth and continued to fight until the 2013 year, when the disease struck his vital organs. Doctors suggested risky heart surgery, but Daniel refused because of the high risk. Unfortunately, he passed away in the same year. 2013 year was incredibly difficult for Ramsey. He was still recovering from a head injury. He was left an only child. The situation seemed to be stabilizing when Ramsey recently started taking prescribed medications regularly. However, this impression was deceptive. With the departure of the father, the tension between mother and son increased. Ramsey started taking strong-acting medications that were left over after his father left. Against this background, his condition has noticeably worsened. His mother was worried about his well-being. She was diagnosed with serious disorders. In parallel, the woman filed an application for official custody of Drems. In a medical institution where medication intake was monitored, the young man's condition improved. After being discharged, he returned to his mother Donna's house, but their relationship deteriorated further. Soon there was a strange electrical fire in the house. The fire started in the basement, where the son was. While Donna ran outside and called for help, Ramsey remained in the room engulfed in flames. At the last minute, rescuers managed to pull him out. An inspection of the scene aroused suspicion, but no evidence of intentional actions was found. After that, they could not stay in the damaged house. Since the apartment needed major repairs, the mother and son temporarily rented another apartment and moved. The situation was becoming more and more complicated. Although Ramsey was already an adult man, his mother continued to show excessive care. She even got custody through the court. However, in the middle of the 2014 year, the son decided to put an end to this. By this point, his mother was officially considered his guardian for about 6 months. Donna's behavior had a negative impact on Ramsey. She tried to control every aspect of his life, which eventually led to the fact that her youngest son left his parents' house. During the sad events, he lived separately for a long time, but the eldest son could not do this because of health problems. 8 months after her father left, Donna visited relatives in Texas. She went to a reunion and considered the possibility of returning to her homeland. Perhaps she wanted to move there with her son. However, in January of the 2014 year, he disappeared. On January 27, 2014, a woman went to the police and reported the disappearance of Ramses Krivo. There were no leads for several days until a bystander came to the police station on January 30th. She reported that she was driving along a snowy rural road in China Township and noticed something unusual on the side of the road. After getting out of the car, the woman discovered something that deeply shocked her. There were disturbing footprints all around. There was a bag nearby, the contents of which she couldn't describe because of the shock. The woman did not examine the find further and called the police. The detectives who arrived at the scene were amazed by what they saw. They immediately began to search the area. The evidence found pointed to a serious incident. The lack of distinctive features and clothing made it difficult to identify the victim. While the police were investigating, another message was received from another settler. The next morning, suspicious objects were found in garbage bags in a dumpster on one of the city streets. Clothing and documents damaged by fire were found at the scene. There were suspicions that these events may be related. At this point, the victim's identity was unknown. Everything found was badly damaged by fire. The documents were unreadable. The only thing that could be established was that it was a man. Before the investigation was completed, there were reports of other disturbing findings in the city. Objects of serious concern were found. A chainsaw with traces of the accident and 4 sharp objects. A bag containing clothes, personal belongings, an empty drink bottle, and some police documents was found in a dumpster. They tried to destroy it all with fire. Law enforcement officers realized that someone was looking for a close relative. Someone had to report him missing. So they started checking recent reports from residents. It took a while. The availability of documents could significantly speed up the investigation. By this time, the experts have completed their analyses. Fingerprints were collected for comparison with databases. It turned out that this is Ramses Krivo, whose disappearance was recently reported by his mother. It was determined that death by suffocation occurred. The analysis also showed that the dose of drugs was 4 times higher than prescribed by the doctor. Detectives already knew that his mother, Donna Skriva, personally supervised his medication. Detectives began checking all the acquaintances, friends, and neighbors of the victim. In any case, what happened didn't look like a coincidence or a personal decision. Traces of the incident were found in various parts of the city. This was probably done to confuse and complicate the investigation. When a certain object was found in a garbage bag, a bystander reported that he saw a certain woman throw this bag right in front of her, but she could not describe her or provide details. She also didn't remember the license plate of the car. Nevertheless, the police received several valuable nuggets of information. Detectives arrived at the place where a suspicious criminal was spotted. Here they found CCTV cameras in nearby shops and institutions, and requested recordings. After studying the records, they managed to get quite high-quality photos of the car and the woman behind the wheel. She was traced to the next gas station. There she very conveniently got into the field of view of the camera. This woman turned out to be Donna Skriva, Ramses' mother, who drove around town in a 1990 Chevrolet Blazer. Everyone was shocked by this development. Although detectives found some of her actions suspicious, they couldn't believe such an unexpected outcome. After receiving the necessary permission, law enforcement officers quickly took Donna to the police station for questioning. Detectives were trying to find out all the circumstances of the incident and understand what motivated this man. Initially, the woman did not cooperate, citing her psychological problems and claiming that Ramsey voluntarily committed suicide. However, this clearly contradicted the facts, given the state of the find and the woman's attempts to hide her tracks. Detectives did not accept this version. They suspected that the catalyst was a new conflict between Donna and Ramsey. During it, the woman lost control. Donna was arrested as the main suspect in the disappearance of her son. She was charged with a serious charge with aggravating circumstances. It was obvious that she was trying to obstruct the investigation and destroy evidence of her involvement. However, the investigation has not yet been completed. Therefore, it was necessary to complete the preparation of documents for the court. During this time, the detectives continued their work. They obtained permission to search the family's apartment and the woman's car. When they first entered the apartment, they were struck by the pungent smell of cleaning agent, which hurt their eyes. Someone carefully tried to hide the traces, but despite the efforts, some suspicious traces were found in the bathroom. Similar traces were found on the wall in the corridor, on the veranda, and on the railing at the entrance. It is noteworthy that there was not a single car in the parking lot. It turned out that the woman tried to give her car to a charity in Detroit. At that time, she did the same thing with Ramsey's car. However, the police managed to find both cars and seize them for examination. A lot of evidence was found in the suspect's car, which was sent for examination. As the investigation progressed, more and more clues emerged. Ramsey's footprints and hair were found in several packages. The woman left traces on the Coca-Cola bottle, documents, and clothes. However, oddly enough, evidence related to Ms. Ramsey was found. Residents learned about the incident from the media and social networks. Everyone was shocked by what had happened. Over time, more and more witnesses came to give evidence to the police. It turned out that Donna had bought a power tool and a blade for him at a hardware store on January 26. She was remembered from the CCTV footage because she came back in the evening, complaining about problems with the power cable. The tool was replaced and was later found among the evidence. A neighbor reported that he heard the sound of an electrical appliance working from the house of the Scriva family. Another neighbor, Patricia, saw Donna a few days before the shocking discoveries of the investigator, barely carrying 3 black bags into her silver SUV. Law enforcement officials believed that the collected evidence would be enough to convince the jury of the woman's involvement in the case. However, the reason for this terrible incident remained unclear. It is known that the head of the family died in May of the 2013 year. Could this event have been a key factor for the further development of events? The defense lawyer insisted on the insanity of his client and asked for a psychiatric examination. But experts said that Donna is sane and can stand trial. The trial began in May of the 2015 year. At the time, Donna still didn't admit his guilt. She continued to declare her innocence before the jury and pleaded for her release. The prosecution pointed out that the medicine found in the victim's body, which exceeded the norm 4 times, was given by Donna and was under her control. In early January, she received a 3-month supply of medication. Less than a month later, an almost empty package was found during a search of the apartment. Prosecutors regarded this as deliberate interference with dangerous medications for her son. The prosecution suggested that after the incident with Ramsey, Donna decided to hide her tracks by buying a power tool. However, Donna did not agree with this version. She told the jury her story. On January 25, according to her, a masked stranger entered the house. Probably with bad intentions, he went to her son's room. At this time, the mother was washing in the basement and did not hear the noise and did not see the criminal. Coming out of the basement, she noticed the open front door. Hearing the sounds from the room Ramsey, the woman went upstairs. There she saw her son lying motionless in bed. Next to him stood a menacing-looking strong man. He wasn't going to hurt her, but he asked her to help cover his tracks. She had to agree. The stranger stayed in the house for 5 whole days, monitoring the execution of his instructions. Only then did he leave. Donna said that in her spare time she was tied up in bed. It was released only for the necessary actions. This story seemed absurd and raised questions. The prosecution sharply criticized this version. In the end, the woman regularly left the house, which did not prevent her from reporting what had happened. On the recordings from the cameras, she looked lonely and calm. Donna could have asked for help from passers-by, but claimed that the stranger was hiding in the back seat of the car. The prosecution indicated that Donna was no longer afraid of the man she now called her tormentor. 16 months later, she calmly talked about it in court. Donna still claimed that she was afraid of this man, but was forced to testify against him in order to avoid punishment. Despite the lengthy trial, Donna, despite the clear evidence, did not admit her role in the disappearance of her son. She went on to talk about the mysterious masked man who, according to her, held her hostage for 5 days. It is strange that the investigator did not find direct evidence. The lawyers insisted on this in order to convince the jury of their client's innocence. They pointed out that Donna was half the height of her son and questioned her ability to carry Ramsey without assistance. According to the defense, she clearly had someone helping her. The case had become controversial, and now the decision was up to the jury. They retired for a meeting. June 23, 2015. After a long debate, Donna Scriva was found guilty of a serious crime with aggravating circumstances. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. She is currently serving her sentence in a Michigan prison without admitting her guilt. Her appeals were rejected.